Bertha Bermúdez. I'm working at ICKamsterdam. First, I was working as a dancer, and later as researcher. When I was working as a dancer, ICK was actually Emio Greco, a dance company based in Holland, under the direction of Emio Greco and Peter Sesholten. And later, it developed its activities into a choreographic center that is called ICKamsterdam, and that the last year has become also the city company. Within ICK, and actually before also in the company Emio Greco PC, there were different activities that in a way were actually part of their artistic process, not only making dance performances, but also generating discourse from the practice of dance, from the body. And they were, I think from the beginning, very much busy in how discourse was related, was generated, how body and movement could in themselves propose important discourse or generate it. So back in 95, when the company started, Peter and Amy already proposed a relationship between two different individuals, between two different disciplines, that more of theater and that of dance. They positioned especially the body of Emio, as a body that had a lot of needs to express and communicate, and to propose a new dance form that will reveal more the power of the dance. And later we could think of that power or that expression as things that we could translate into knowledge or something like this. So from that beginning, dealing already with the discourse that come from the body, there were also in many occasions salons and encounters organized where discussions took place in relation to writing and dance, in relation to critique and dance, in relation to other subjects that had to do with how to position dance as discourse. The activities within the company were already in themselves giving signal into the interest into research, interest into understanding what is it that the body produces, into how others deal with that, and how to transmit it to others. So in that path, I could develop from dancer becoming researcher or coordinating education programs within the same institution, because the ground was already provided for such an exchange. So it's not an external imposition coming from another institution into the choreographic praxis, but it's actually something that comes with it, which I think in this context we are now talking about repertoire, it's relevant because sometimes we only think of the process of dance just as a final result. You have a performance, you have people that do something, but then it's finished. And I think the proposal that ICK has generated, and I think in the past 15 years, many other companies and choreographers are actually revealing that the processes that are behind the just final result of the performance are very relevant, not just because it's intrinsic, is part of, but because what happens in the rehearsal environments are actually the dance. So we've been very much, I think, dealing with the study of the dance as a final result, probably very much influenced with the perspective of visual arts, where you look at an object of observation from where you can derive theories and construct truth, while performance are yes, are events, are things that happen in a moment, but they are also a conglomeration of choices, ideas, encounters, research developments that are found through quite a long period of time. Let's say in the case of Peter and Emio, performances are created through, at the beginning it could be like a year, a 2-year, 6 months period of work that is very rich. It's a very long time process that cannot be compared with a 45-minute performance that indeed can be thought as a result, but I like to think it more as a proposal of lived experiences that happen in a communal environment, and that through the selection of moments that relate more to that you want to say are presented, but are not excused to not be also taken into account. So I think we could reconsider the idea of repertory, or expand its definition, or expand its methodology of study, not only to deal with the final result, that event we can attend or we can watch in a video, but to every other aspect and act that happens previous to it and after it. So in that, I think it's important to talk about temporality, in the sense that dance is not an object, obvious, but if we go further with that comparison, the temporality, I believe, in both affects. There is nothing that stays forever. Everything changes through time. Everything is malleable. But of course, in dealing with dance that deals with movement, it's like the power of malleability. It's completely the art form that is constantly dealing with transformation. And in that sense, it can seem to indeed be difficult to grasp, be difficult to understand, to reenact and all these things. But from the perspective of the dancer, actually the dance and the temporality allows really of a perspective of change, a perspective of development that indeed has traces. So it's not the final act, but it's something that happens before. It is that act and many others that will come. And I am perceiving in my own body things that had happened, are happening, and will happen. Past, present, future are constant part of construction of movement. If you do it in a narrative way or in a just physical way, it doesn't matter. But it's a constant flow that indeed it's framed by the concept we are dealing with, the performance in itself, our own bodies, and it is transmitted. And I think in relation to the work we've been doing, the research projects we've been doing within ICK, with Emio and Peter, the temporality aspect, the constant transformation, the orality and the transmission of these experiences are very, very much at the center of attention. So we've been looking at indeed not this final result, but we've been looking first at what happens when we start working. How do you prepare the body, and how is this relevant? We didn't put research questions to actually try to understand ourselves, but actually we were very much aiming to tell people how we worked, open up knowledge that we considered relevant through our own praxis, and just open it and reveal that indeed these things also happen and are part of the praxis. So I remember when we started doing research, and there was a whole discussion around the Dutch scene in relation to subsidies, and the subsidies were given in relation if you are or not a repertory company. For us that was very interesting, because we ourselves consider that we are a repertory company, in the sense that We were constantly touring and performing works from years in the past, but we kept bringing them back and reenact and keep touring. But for the subsidy buddies, repertory meant something else that we were not. So then we were busy with the question of, so can contemporary repertoire exist, or repertoire is only something that is really far in the past, or that it has a trace, or what actually makes it? And then out of that subsidy situation, we thought, okay, so for us within our own work, what is it that is tangible besides our own bodies that we could indeed transmit further? Like if we look at the work, first piece, Bianco, done in 1995, what is it that we can pass? I remember Peter Scholten, he was saying like, okay, if I want to give Bianco to another artist, what will I give? Do we give the body of Emio? What do we give? And that question resonated, I think, a lot in the whole table of discussion that we were there. And indeed, it rang the bell to these ideas of scores, notations, traces that are materialized in the form of documents. Dance is an intangible form. I would like to think it as tangible in the sense that I am my body. I'm tangible. I can't really agree with the sense of ephemerality, because memories are there and are part of what you are or become. So it's more like a sediment of experiences, and we transmit these experiences physically and orally to other people. So for me, when we started the process of research, we were all the time departing from that transmission. How do we give, how do we pass the work? Because it's organic and it's normal, and that's how I've learned it. So I can keep passing. The question was, okay, and how do I pass it to you that you're not a dancer? We're not going to train together for years. That kind of investment is not going to happen, but what can I give you that indeed provide something besides a theoretical perspective or a performance? Is there any other thing that we generate and that can be transmitted, or that we can distillate from our praxis, or reduce from the whole amount of experience we have? What is it that I can give you and that can make sense in relation to the work we do and to this communication? So in that we started looking at different ways of documenting dance, notating dance. We were also very interested with relations with digital media, in the sense that we had the first example from Western modern dance from Forsythe with improvisation technologies that was created with Chris Ziegler and Nick Hafner. And in there you can see a first attempt to use digital media as a space where words, sounds, images can live together and can allow a different explanation of dance that just script as text. So that was very tempting and opening a lot of questions. So we initiated together with the High School of the Arts here in Amsterdam with Marieke Hogemon, we initiated the first research project called Capturing Intention. And we collaborated at that time. Scott de la Junta was part of AHACA. So we collaborated very much with him, having feedback and also having guidance in relation to different examples to look up, trying to frame what were the questions and generate the research project. So immediately we invested in that process. I personally studied Laban notation and Venice notation a year, the basic course, so just to have an idea what it means, what it is. I also took reference from Buto Kaden, which is a Buto DVD-ROM on Ijikata's work, which was very interesting. And of course I looked at filming, motion tracking, like people writing, that study a bit the history of notation and traces around choreography. That was very interesting, but the most important part was to decide. For me, it's very important to know what is it that is essential in this work that makes it different from the work of Forsythe or any other choreographer I've worked with. What is it that is essential in this collaboration that makes this work be different? What is the characteristic? So looking at that essential aspect, indeed we agreed that intentionality, in the sense movement-oriented goal, was important in the work of Emio. When you see the work, you see there are a lot of... It's a very specific way of moving that, of course, belongs to him, but you see there is something more in that physicality. It's not just shapes. You see something else that affects you very much. And that it actually constructs a certain dramaturgy in relation to time, in relation to space, and the body in itself. So we thought this is interesting, actually, to point out this intentional aspect of movement and to see how the different modes of documenting will deal with that. That was mainly the first research question. What do we do in our attempt to capturing dance? That was the research question for capturing intention. And we developed an interdisciplinary research project. It was interdisciplinary because human is interdisciplinary, because dance is completely interdisciplinary in the sense you are moving, you are talking, you are producing sound, you are imagining, many different layers of our human condition are placed, tuned and highlighted. So thinking in the study of it, we thought it was really interesting to look at different perspectives, how a film director will look at the work of Emio thinking and intentionality. What will you do with the camera? How will you deal with these things? And what are the different approaches towards it? How motion tracking will deal indeed with intentions, that actually what intention produces are qualities of movement. It's a mental state that produces that the way you move is different. It's not about what you move, it's about how you move. And that how is a quality. And then we're looking at tracking devices that are dealing with algorithms, that are dealing with numbers, that are dealing with quantities. So a clash, a friction, how do they deal? That was a very interesting part of the research as well. Then we were also being informed by neurocognitive science to explain us intentionality and how the brain deals with this. And then we also had, of course, notators that will look really from the perspective of movement analysis and their syntax of writing about, yes, this specific work of Emio Greco. We looked at first the Double Skin, Double Mind workshop, which is not, it's a preparation, it's not a performance, it's just a way to enter in the studio, to start tuning your brain and your body and entering principles of how Emio conceives time, space, the body, and movement. So we thought that it would be interesting first to look at this, try to clarify what is it that it is, and find ways to transmit it further. Since in itself, it's also a method of transmission, it's not a performance. So in that sense, we started trying to unite or create a common language for all the different disciplines, and I developed a glossary. I was very appealed by the idea of collecting terminology. I'm always fascinated by etymology and figuring out where words come from, what is it that stays when we name things and why and all these things. So I found interesting to collect and provide the perspective of Emio. So I collected a lot of transcriptions of him teaching, what is it that he says, of course of my understanding as well as dancing with him for years, like, okay, he's saying this word, comes back, keeps coming back, it seems important. So we were trying to define it so that another person could understand when we say breathing or when we say gentle rebounding. And that is not just a description of what you have to do physically, but mainly is dealing with the state in which you are when you do that, or a mix of them. So we created this glossary that was divided in internal information and external. Internal was the definitions of Emio, like how he conceives these ideas, and external was just encyclopedic definition from the British dictionary saying, well, breathing is this, so that for people they could see immediately a common ground in relation to this is what is generally understood, if we can conceive the idea that we all can have a general understanding, and this is how it's been appropriated. So I think that first phase was very interesting in the idea of realizing that the orality in the transmission of dance, it's a very key important part, because it does appropriate the world. So this specific person that produces this performance that you're going to watch and try to understand has built through time a concrete, specific way of dealing with movement and dance that reveals also how this person sees the world and communicates it. So the glossary was a very strong basic material for the film, for the interactive environment, for all the other aspects. The result of the first research, Capturing Intention, went into a book publication that was dealing mainly with articles about issues that were at stake in relation to documenting dance, notating dance, intentionality, archiving, documentation, all these issues that at that time, we're talking 2006, 2008, were actually starting. There is a film documentary to give a general perspective on the workshop Double Skin, Double Mind. There is a interactive DVD-ROM also done by Chris Ziegler, who did the Forsythe DVD-ROM. So there is this kind of continuation in a proposal of aesthetics, but not only aesthetics, but also of how digital media and design can align their strengths with revealing principles of dance. I think that has been a very interesting path that has continued through the years. And if you look now, for example, at Motion Bank or previous synchronous objects, you can see in there that indeed the relationship between design, interactive interfaces, it's really rich in relation to revealing through the graphic, or I believe even more through the sonic, revealing this atmosphere or texture that dance generates. So we have also developed an interactive installation, which for me it's a key point of not of turn, but it's the element that shifts most the whole paradigm in relation to documentation, to transmission, tangibility or intangibility of dance, because the interactive installation, it's not a 2D, it's not a computer, it's not a cognitive environment where you are again observing the information. I think in there we were looking more for what about getting back the loop into experience, from researching and understanding something that is embodied. You can disembody it to pass it through, as I explained before, because you will not be in the studio with me. That is possible, so there is tangible. What about creating again an embodied praxis? And that's the proposal of the installation that uses technology from performance and technology from motion tracking in order to create an environment that could be conceived as an archive where all this information we collected from Emio Greco's workshop, The Skin of the Mind, is collected, is inside. It's like a vessel, but you can only access it if you are moving, if you are indeed physically active in front of it. So that idea problematizes many things, problematizes also the role of digital media, problematizes virtuality and reality, problematizes also the why of doing these things, the purpose of doing these things, and for who. And I think that was a very interesting point in our research, because through this object that became an object of transaction, where Emio Greco virtually was teaching his method to people, opened the door to think about education, to think about indeed what is the implication of these documents back into the field, back into the own maker. That's relevant, but what is it? How is it influencing the field? Is it or not? So when we moved into the second research project, Inside Movement Knowledge, that was mainly the core. We took the installation as the basic instrument to keep going further with the questions. We made another kind of interdisciplinary atmosphere where institutions were there, and there were educational institutions like Utrecht University with the theater and media department. There was the High School of Amsterdam with the lectorate research on dance and praxis, and the modern dance theater department of the school, with more the teachers and the students were engaged. There was also at that time, NIMC, which was the New Media Institute, now Lima, dealing with issues on visual arts, performing arts, blurring their territories, and dealing with ideas of documentation. So in Inside Movement Knowledge, we were trying to understand more how this installation and everything else was affecting or could affect, for example, dance teachers. Can this digital tool be part of dance education? Can we implement in the design of these objects also those who will deal with it? And in which way these questions and these results will arrive to academia. So these were mainly the issues that we took into Inside Movement Knowledge. We also spread into an international network hosting most of the research groups that were dealing with projects that are similar, like the Siobhan Davis Archive, Wayne McGregor Research, TKB project from Portugal on Ruiz Horta's work, the Batco Collective. So there were different moments where we could meet and discuss and exchange about what is it that the other groups are finding and how are they revealing their choreographic knowledge or dance knowledge. So in that sense, we arrived to a point that indeed we, coming from specificity of the body of Emio and the way he communicates and transmits the work in the studio, that then becomes a performance, into generating objects, documents that can talk about principles of work and that can reveal knowledge of dance, to understand what are the implications of doing these things. In relation to, for example, the impact of this research for Emio, we could say that, like probably in other projects, like for example the Wayne McGregor project, you can see that there is a matching 100% relationship between the research and the work. He wants to know more about how choreographic thinking works, so the research informs completely in the process of making. While in the case of our research, the questions were more on, how can we do intentionality? How do we deal with intentionality? What is this? And actually what happened is that it did influence in codifying, further codification of, for example, the workshop, to allow Emio to free himself from it in a way, like you fix so much that then you can move on. So I think the research has been of value in relation to further thinking on ways of documenting, further thinking on new proposals on the idea of repertoire and also of reenactment, what for you document something, and also opening probably the the perspective. Sometimes we think you document something to safeguard it as it is and keep it like that, and do it exactly the same way. What if you just give certain information that allows people to get inspired? It doesn't have always to be a reenactment of something. It can be a recreation of something. And I think we are much more interested on that aspect. The last research project we are busy with, the pre-choreographic elements, still not even yet arriving to the performances. The next step, you prepare the body and then you start generating material. The idea of this project is to construct a glossary to focus on the alphabet, on the abecedere, and look again at concepts and terminology. It's building up the lexicon of their work in relation to the potential to create physicality. And then it's more like, okay, let's define these terms that appeared from the physicality in itself and see if you can hand this out and people can then go further to create what they are. So it's not even thinking on our own field, but just expanding to other disciplines even, while again helping clarify, helping the transmission within their own work, with, I think, the same result as before. Once you fix it, you can move on, or you can allow a new phoenix to appear. You need to kill first to reappear. So I think in that sense, we are proposing a malleable idea of repertory, in the sense that it can have different resources that are not just a performance, and that it can have also different features that are not only equal to the beginning, but probably more interested in idea of recreation.